concealed healer. I'm sitting in an ordinary kitchen in a block of flats in Prague, a quite ordinary Smíchov block of flats, and I'm sitting at a table which might have been the place of one of the greatest mysteries in the last several centuries.
Je místem, kde se odehrála jedno z největších tajemství za posledních několik století.
The story of the man who used to sit here many years ago began when he was 33 years of age at Easter 1945. He was sitting there when all of a sudden it happened.
Pak to přišlo.
All at once, without any preparation, without any interest in philosophy or religious teaching or anything like this, something happened to his consciousness, something he was unable to describe at that moment.
Se stalo cosi s jeho vědomím, co vlastně sám ani v té chvíli nemohl popsat.
It was a sudden opening, like a bolt from the blue, and it meant that his entire experience to that moment acquired like everybody else's suddenly changed.
U každého z nás se rázem změnila.
Suddenly he learned that a big part of what we humans perceive as our reality, our inconvertible reality, our only reality, is very often only a proportional reality and partial reality, only a segment of the complete reality.
Je jenom výsekem reality a není realitou celou.
I treated patients full-time for 42 years actually. Well, for about 45 years, so it's quite a long time. I possess two gifts. The gift of perceiving life laws. I used it to work out the healing, the biotronics.
Vnímání životních zákonitostí. Tak tím jsem vypracovával to léčení, tu biotroniku.
And so I became a biotronic healer. Mr. Zezulka usually used to treat his acquaintances since the activity was not officially approved. He used to treat them in his room. Unfortunately, it is empty now. He used to come here. I think he healed thousands of patients during his work. He was healing for about 45 years. The extent of his knowledge of medicine was astounding. And I think that not only did he use it for purpose of an appropriate treatment application based on the doctor's diagnosis, but he also truly strived for cooperation with doctors of medicine for all those years. He had absolutely no intention to compete with them. He always used to say that he was not able to heal everything, that he could only heal diseases of bioenergetic origin, and that for other diseases he could only strengthen, for example, the immunity of organism, but that those illnesses belong to the field of medicine. Patients used to come here in this hall. There was something like a waiting room. There were chairs here. He used to invite the patients. Sometimes there were, for example, 20 or 30 of them a day, so he arranged appointments with them in chronological order. Every patient was invited for a certain time because the hall is small and wouldn't accommodate all of them. He had an exceptional personality. He did not accept money for treatment. He did it because he wanted to help the people.
protože těm lidem chtěl pomáhat.
He was better known abroad than here, which is strange. It was perhaps after that first Psychotronic Congress, which took place in Prague in 1973. It was there that he became well known because he demonstrated his abilities and treated all the people who attended that lecture. He gave his power to the people and they could feel it.
Dával sílu celku a lidi cítili.
He is in my memory as a kind, silver-haired man, quite ordinary. If you met him in the street, you would never say he's a man of any extraordinary ability. He had no mesmerizing stare or anything like this. He was an ordinary man, very kind and quiet, maybe a bit timid.
Člověk s nějakou mimořádnou schopností, jo. Vůbec se nedá mluvit o uhranšivým pohledu nebo něco, tak byl to prostě naprosto obyčejný člověk, velice vlídnej a tichej až plachej.
I have happy memories of him. We used to sit together at this table and talk about matters. He used to tell me how he imagined it.
Řešili jsme ty věci, on je vyprávěl jako to, jak si to představuje.
Well, I think Mr. Zezulka belonged to those people who were born ahead of their time and whose thoughts and findings would be confirmed in the future. I know that when I came to him in 1967, I had problems with my thyroid and spine. He not only healed me and set me free from my problems within about 4 months, but then we began to talk about his gift of knowledge, about those laws of life. And Mr. Zezulka knew exactly how much he could give to anybody, and he tried to teach them to think on their own, to change their attitude towards life. He didn't present finished teachings.
Může čeho dát a snažil se lidi spíš naučit, aby mysleli sami, aby změnili ten svůj životní postoj. On nepředkládal nějakou hotovou nauku.
He wanted people to find it out themselves, to start thinking, since as early as at that time he foresaw everything. The greenhouse effect, water pollution, the destruction of the rainforests. He foresaw everything. The terrible growth of cancerous diseases, the decreasing age of those patients, and it seemed impossible to me, as at that time nature was still very nice and such threats were not so close.
To nemůže být tak docela pravda, protože tehdy ještě ta příroda byla jako velice hezká a ta hrozba nestála tak blízko, ta hrozba.
I met Mr. Zezulka personally. He made a very good impression on me because, while being a layman, he was able to discuss things with me as if he were one of my colleagues.
Dokázal se mnou debatovat na vyloženě, řekl bych, kolegiální úrovni.
He had mastered our medical terminology.
Naši lékařskou terminologii.
He was also educated in philosophy and as the creator of a very interesting philosophical system, which attracts me very much, but I do not have enough strength and persistence to apply it to my own life.
Velice zaujal, jenže nemám dost vlastní síly a houževnatosti, abych jej směrem k vlastní osobě uplatnil v praxi.
Otherwise, I can vouch for that fact that he used to follow our professional journals to an extent. That surprised and even confused me. He was aware of such acute problems that I was sometimes unable to follow him.
Jako překvapilo a vyvedlo z míry a měl přehled o takových aktuálních problémech, že jsem mu místy nestačil.
For example, I visited him when I still wasn't aware of AIDS, but he already knew about it, and so I naturally pretended that I knew as well. So we had a conversation about this topic. I felt rather uncomfortable. Only half a year later, the first information about this disease came out in one of the professional journals.
Vyšla první informační zpráva ve vnitřním lékařství o této chorobě.
A biotronic and magnetizer is a man with the following innate ability. The power goes through him. He just modulates it. But it goes through him, but it isn't in contact with his own bioenergetic system.
Ale ona prochází a není nějak ve styku s jeho vlastním bioenergetickým systémem.
Mr. Zezulka was a biotronic healer, and this means that he actually promoted this area to a discipline as the first one and after quite a long time. All his predecessors had worked in a way that they, in the best case, felt that something was streaming out of their hands, something that refreshed people and gave them energy. Somehow greater energy, but that was all. They used it just as it was. He was the first to understand that this energy isn't compact, that it comprises of many components, and he started to realize how these elements correspond to an individual's state of health or disease. He actually developed biopathology, a discipline concerning disruptions of our bodily vital systems during an illness, and he developed ways of modulating or tuning these powers to individual diseases. In this way, he actually shifted the possibilities higher by several levels, since until that time, all of these people influenced the energy by their own quality and thus narrowed the discipline in which they could work. Some of them were better at healing gastric ulcers, for example, others at something else. But he developed this discipline up to a level of so-called sanatorship, when such a man, provided that he is at the highest level, has mastered the discipline as a whole in the overall scope and very powerfully, since as he becomes sharper, he sharpens the interception in the vital area as well, and effectiveness grows in this way. It could be said that, for example, cancer processes can be healed only if the healer is at the level of 8 and more on a 12-grade scale. Only a few people at present have reached this level, but let's hope there will be more and more of them. The treatment by Mr. Zezulka looked very simple. A man entered an ordinary flat. It was a bit gloomy, not at all arranged for such activity. There, in the middle of the room, the patient was standing, and Mr. Zezulka was standing behind or in front of him and simply operated with the tips of his fingers from a short distance, of about 5 centimeters. And in this way he radiated into the person. In about 5 minutes, he said, "That's all." And the person felt better. I don't know how it is possible, but that is how it was. The influence of his personality was simply amazing, and it had an effect on everybody. Such composure, calm, and great power, and yet incredible humility. He put the known truths into effect every second of his life. There were few such men who were able to live in the way Mr. Zezulka did. In the beginning of our interest in healing, there was our personal experience with Mr. Josef Zezulka, an outstanding Prague healer. Our experience was highly positive. A patient suffering from cancer in the stage of generalization was healed. It happened almost 18 years ago. We had 2 more similar experiences with Mr. Josef Zezulka. There were 2 people with cancer. Both of them were healed. This happened 10 years ago. As far as I'm concerned, I respected Mr. Zezulka highly, since I saw numbers of those people, those poor men and women who were coming to him and who were helped, and he did so selflessly, taking nothing in exchange. It was difficult for many of them to go upstairs, so they had to be supported. People with really serious diseases would come here. Every man with cancer that I treat is put on a diet. This is the very first thing I do. He mustn't eat anything that causes cancer.
Mu dám dietu. Nesmí jíst to, co silně vytváří rakovinu.
Among the worst things causing cancer are smoked goods. A preservation of meat in an inedible state in which it cannot even be eaten by bacteria. And yet, man eats it. Yes, it is exactly like this. So the man mustn't eat a gram of smoked meat. He mustn't consume any roasted products, coffees, ersatz coffee, cocoa, chocolate. He mustn't eat baked products.
Tedy všechny druhy kávy, i meltu, i kakao, čokoládu. Nesmí nic, co je pečeného.
If any food must be baked like bread, cut off the crust. He mustn't eat anything fried. When frying, the carcinogen is produced in the brown crust.
Vlastně v té hnědé kůrce se vytváří ten kancerogen.
So he must avoid these things, and then he won't get cancer. Children's cancer, which has become so frequent recently, is absolutely unnecessary.
Jenom tady vyvstala a tak strašně řádí, tak ta je naprosto zbytečná.
If the woman hadn't eaten smoked goods, drunk coffee, and smoked during pregnancy, she wouldn't have caused cancer of her baby.
Tak to dítě, tomu dítěti nevytvoří rakovinu.
Well, I have a lot of experience with biotronics since we were unlucky to have more ill people in our family. I myself was healed in the biotronic way by Mr. Zezulka.
Já sama jsem teda jako biotronicky odléčena u pana Zezulky.
I had a malignant tumor 7 years ago, and as I had this experience with my son and I believed in this treatment absolutely, I contacted Mr. Zezulka, and after 10 visits, after 10 of these healing sessions, I was absolutely cured.
No a po deseti návštěvách, po 10 jako těch léčebných kůrách jsem byla v naprostém pořádku.
The tumor disappeared on its own. It became smaller and smaller with each session, and after 10 visits it was gone for good. Without any treatment by a doctor of medicine, I am healthy again today.
V zásahu lékaře jsem já dneska opět teda úplně zdravá, no.
My father-in-law was also treated in the biotronic way by Mr. Zezulka. He had a malignant tumor on the left hemisphere of his brain. It manifested itself by the fact that he was losing stability and had digestive problems.
Ztratil stabilitu a vůbec měl i zažívací potíže.
It was really bad with him. Well, because we knew Mr. Zezulka at the time, he healed my father-in-law as well. So after 10 or maybe 12 sessions, my father-in-law had had maybe more treatments than me. But it was 10 years ago, and I must say that he has been absolutely healthy since then.
Něco více těch léčebných zásahů, ale už je to před 10 lety a musím říct, že se Tchán těší teda výbornému zdraví.
So we are grateful to Mr. Zezulka for very much. It's a pity we were unable to repay him in full.
Vděčíme za mnohé. Škoda, že jsme mu to nemohli nikdy v takové míře vrátit zase zpátky.
If you don't meet him personally, it is something unnatural, something you wouldn't believe unless you saw it with your own eyes. And if you receive experience of this firsthand, it will change you. It will change your attitude towards men to a certain extent.
Se na vlastní kůži takhle. Takže vůbec se člověk změní i by řekla přístup k lidem nějak a vůbec nějak tak bych...
I don't know. I would perhaps help anyone. Man is changed. He is actually born again, and so he is very grateful for it, for the help, and thus he becomes a different person.
Jako je vděčnej nesmírně teda za tu pomoc, tak se stane asi jiný.
I don't know how to express it in a different way. The stages of the evolution of Mr. Zezulka's healing ability were rather atypical. It is usually more gradual, but here the beginning was extremely swift. He was actually able to provide the most demanding proof thanks to his personal forwardness, since in biotronics, the most demanding task is to heal cancer.
Biotronice vlastně je nejobtížnějším například léčba nádorových procesů, nebo tedy rakovin.
You know, it takes a lot of work to heal such a patient, and it's very difficult. And he was actually from the very beginning able to give this proof.
Byl schopen tyhle průkazy dávat.
I would like to stress now that there were so many people with cancer that Mr. Zezulka was unable to manage all of them. He therefore used to tell patients who came with, for example, a sore knee or something trivial, "This is what medicine is for. I take care only of more serious cases like cancer. These can't be helped by anybody else." And he really treated these patients, and I would say he was successful with 80%.
Jako tyto pacienty léčil a řekla bych z takových 80% úspěšně.
For this kind of treatment, or for this bioenergetic gift, it depends on the intensity the biotronic or magnetizer has, and on the composition of the energy and its quality.
Jaký má stupeň intenzity, potom jaké má složení té síly a pak záleží na kvalitě.
It is, for example, not possible for a biotronic who eats dead corpses to heal anybody, or one who has other habits that a biotronic healer cannot have, for example, smoking or drinking alcohol.
Který má jiné vlastnosti, které nesmí mít biotronik. Aby třeba kouřil nebo pil alkohol.
I had multiple sclerosis when I was about 19 years old, and when they treated me in hospital, there weren't any results. They considered me an untreatable patient. They didn't know what to do with me, and so they let me go home for weekends.
A jelikož mě teda už tak nějak považovali za ležáka tam, už nevěděli, co se mnou, pouštěli mě na sobotu a neděli domů na propustku.
And thanks to these days off when I was at home, Mr. Zezulka could visit me and heal me, although he said at first that he didn't know if his treatment would have any positive effect, but that we could try it anyway. And when he came for the second time, third time, and fourth time, every time there was a slight improvement in my state. So when he came to me for the second time, I made perhaps 2 steps. Yes, before that I wasn't able to do even this. I couldn't even stand up, and so I was really astounded. And then, after several visits at our place, I was walking, holding my father's hands like this, and I went from my room to the living room and back again.
A přišla jsem ze svého pokoje do obýváku a zase zpátky třeba.
Otherwise, my parents had to carry me to the toilet, to the bathroom, to the table in the dining room, and so on. Yes, it was not possible for me, but I was getting better and better.
No ale čím dál se to víc a víc takhle zlepšovalo.
In the end, my father would drive me to Mr. Zezulka into his flat in Šmíchov, where he lived. He told me that in the environment where he lived, all the time, I was breathing, that he was radiating with my whole body. You know, it is very hard to find the appropriate words to describe him. To say that he was a good man and so on, well, yes, this is for sure. But in my opinion, this is a very weak description of what he was really like.
A tak dále, to jako byl, to je samozřejmé, že ano. Ale podle mě jsou to ještě strašně slabá slova podle toho, jaký opravdu byl, jo.
To put it simply, if it were not for my parents and him, I wouldn't stand here now. I would be still lying in some institution for immobile patients, or maybe not. Yes, you know, I was born again thanks to him. They had written me off in the hospital. They had simply said to my parents, "Find her some place where she can live." Yes, or vegetate in this way, if I can say it like this. They simply wrote me off there and said, "Sorry, there is nothing else we can do for her. We are not able to do anything." So I'm grateful to him and his asceticism. He was able to restrain himself from so many things, so the quality of his energy he gave to the ill ones was as powerful as possible. Yes, he used to live without any partner. He didn't drink any alcohol or smoke, or anything like this. No meat, nothing that would disrupt the energy he was passing on.
Rozumíte, něco takového, žádné maso prostě, jo? Nic takového, co by narušovalo sebemíň, tu energii, kterou on předával.
The gift of spirit, the gift of knowing the truth and philosophy of being without learning anything or listening to anything, the gift of the ability and the possibility of tuning oneself not to the subconsciousness but to the overconsciousness is very rare. Only very few people have it.
To je velmi vzácný dar, který má jen velmi málo lidí.
This was just one of his gifts. Another gift was the ability to heal. The gift of spirit enabled him to develop the gift of healing, and it was developed to the full extent. In many years, perhaps thousands of patients have been here. Some of them were very seriously ill, and some of them even in a state of no further hope.
A mnozí z nich vlastně v době, kdy už vlastně veškerá další naděje byla ztracena.
Man is just one of the creatures. We used to be lower creatures. Then we became higher ones. Then even higher ones. Now we are people, only people. This is nothing special. One day we will reach a higher level than man, then even higher than that of the Superman, then even higher than Superman. This is evolution. After all, look back to ancient history. The highest creature was perhaps the monkey, or long before that it was perhaps a virus. Then, thanks to evolution, a higher and higher creature. At present it is man, but he's nothing special.
Vývojem stále vyšší tvor. Momentálně člověk, ale to není nic tak moc.
The substance of Mr. Zezulka's philosophy is a simple imperative. People, you shouldn't want to only believe or know, you should want to think. This is the very foundation of this philosophy, since if you think, you will start to ponder on the others, you will start to consider any other as a creature, with the same rights as you. You will start decreasing the level of your egoism, since it is egoism that enables us to cheat others, steal from them, or wage wars against them, for example. It is ego that wants to obtain something that belongs to another person. There is only one aid available, not a ban, but philosophy. People should be more aware of the cosmic natural laws, which always were and always will be valid. And there may be fewer written laws one day, and more of the law inside each of us.
Vesmírných přírodních zákonů, které vždycky platily a platí a platit budou. A možná, že jednou bude méně psaných zákonů a o to více zákona v každém z nás.
We used to sit together and he told me about his dream, to have a department of his own where he could devote himself to those patients. He used to say, treating outpatients is also important, but if I could devote my time to everybody 3 times a day, I think I could do wonders, but I haven't a chance of trying it, unfortunately. Then he told me that a doctor occasionally allowed him into hospital, but that he had to face terrible problems there.
Do nemocnice, ale že jako narážel na neskutečný problémy.
This was actually very interesting, when the doctors got into trouble themselves and medicine didn't or couldn't help them. They sought his help and let him treat them.
Lékařská věda nepomohla, nebo medicína už jim nemohla pomoct, že jeho pomoc vyhledávali a nechali se léčit.
And they really verified it on their own, that he had helped them. But he wanted to explain to the doctors what he knew about the treatment of cancer, because it is one of the bioenergetic diseases. Some of the doctors were interested, but the times were not favorable for this at all. Those doctors were often persecuted by their superiors, and Mr. Zezulka, who strived to prove by results, was very often disappointed by the approach of the doctors who simply couldn't do it because there was a danger they would lose their jobs.
často zklamán postojem těch lékařů, kteří prostě to nemohli udělat, protože jim hrozilo ztráta nebo propuštění ze zaměstnání.
But there were also various periods of hope during his career.
Byly i různý takový nadějný údobí během toho jeho působení.
For example, when he worked in a hospital in Vimperk, where he was in charge of the dormitory. However, cooperation was stopped by the management as soon as positive results of his treatment were shown. He was not interested in his own credit at all, but he was sorry that what he was bringing to people would not be preserved.
Osobní uznání, ale mrzelo ho, že to, co přináší lidem, že se nezachová.
He wanted to train a few of his disciples, since I have already said he anticipated a great increase in cancer, mainly with children, and he was really worried about it. I never saw him angry. He was just sorry that people didn't want to think.
Já jsem ho nikdy neviděla, že by byl rozlobený. On vždycky jenom litoval, že lidi nechtějí myslet.
He didn't succeed in what he was fighting for so much, and what was not in his own interest, but in all of our interest. He tried so much so that the discipline he presented so often to various authorities of that time was incorporated in the group of disciplines helping ill people.
Tak aby tento obor byl začleněn do rodiny oborů sloužícím lidem v nemoci.
He didn't do it for his own sake. He did it just so that the biotronic discipline would exist.
Aby ten obor byl, aby existoval.
When he was teaching me, he used to say to me, "Thomas, I'm just an ordinary man. Don't make anything of me and never try to be significant. It's of no use."
A nikdy se nesnažte nic znamenat. Není to k ničemu.
And the philosophy was the main gift I received from him, and it helped me the most with my work.
Darem od něj a tím, co mi pomáhalo vlastně v mé práci nejvíce.
He always stressed the interest of the whole in his philosophy, not to profit from my ability, not to want to treat for money or fame, and he also stressed the necessity of the highest purity of self-devotion.
Bych nikdy nechtěl léčit pro peníze, pro slávu. A zdůrazňoval nutnost co největší možné čistoty a sebeobětování.
Well, I saw many patients who came here in a really deplorable state, and after, let's say, 3 months, they were extremely happy that Mr. Zezulka had healed them.
Byli nesmírně šťastní, že je pan Zezulka vyléčil.
Some of them were very ready to witness that they had been healed by Mr. Zezulka, but most of them were afraid of what their doctors would say to them, because doctors didn't want to hear this. It was very difficult for it to reach the public.
Bylo to velice těžké, aby to jako pronikalo na veřejnost.
And Mr. Zezulka, in such difficult moments, since it happened several times in his life that the research was very successful and finished with great success, but followed by a great silence, used to tell me, "Tomáš, you know, I get nothing out of it. As people make their bed, so they must lie in it. They either want to be treated or not. It's their business, not mine."
Jak si to lidi udělají, tak to budou mít. Buď chtějí být léčeni, nebo ne. Je to na nich. Ne na mě, je to jejich věc.
It's not awkward to die, it is awkward to be born.
Ošklivě se narodit.
Man is born, dies, is born again, dies, and what happens when we die? We leave our body and live on for some shorter or longer time before we are born again. And this life we live now prepares our next fate for us. We are preparing a fate we need for our evolutionary education, for our development.
A tímto životem, který teď žijeme, si vytváříme osud, připravujeme si vstup do takového osudu, který potřebujeme ke svému vývojovému vzdělání, ke svému vývoji.
Man mustn't just believe in something. He must think, ponder and change.
A nic.